Hi, Tim Blanchard here with divorce661.com. And what we're doing in this live stream is we're talking about mediation, divorce mediation specifically, and everything you ever wanted to know about divorce mediation, if it would be useful for you, if it would be applicable to you, if it's required, how it's helpful, how it's not, um, all those types of things. So let's get into it. I have some slides for you guys today so you can kind of follow along. All right. So, what is divorce mediation? I'm just going to read this out to you because this is what I came up with. It clearly explains as best as possible the best description of what mediation is. So, what is divorce mediation? Divorce mediation is a flexible dispute resolution process in which an impartial, neutral third party facilitates negotiations between parties to help them devise their own mutually acceptable solutions. The mediator asks questions, reframes issues, assists the parties to understand each other, making suggestions and to help identify solutions and options to aid the parties in reaching their own solutions. I made a note here to state that mediators do not take sides, they don't pass down decisions, and they don't offer legal advice. Now, that last comment about the legal advice, one caveat there is if you, and I'm going to talk about the different types of divorce mediators, if you do have a mediator happens to be a divorce attorney, you can, obviously they can then supply legal advice to you if you ask for it or if it's needed in order to do that. Because the reason I bring that up is most mediators are not attorneys. They're going to be someone who took a class or certification, and we'll be talking about those different certifications later as well. So, but yeah, we'll talk about that later as far as the different options you have for mediation. So, the first thing I wanted to start off on is, do you even need mediation? Mediation is not required in divorce cases. You do not have to go to court for mediation, either using a court mediator or a private mediator, and those are two options. Obviously, you do not have to go to mediation whatsoever. Sometimes we'll get calls and people think that mediation is required as part of the process. It is not. And I think what happens and where people get led down the wrong path is when they're trying to do their own divorce and they are not moving their case forward, they will get a notice from the court that says your case has been assigned to mediation and to show up on certain dates and have your paperwork ready for discussion and so forth, because people are not aware that it's not required, but the court's assuming because your case has not moved forward that you need some intervention and some help. So you get those notices, and next thing you know, you think you need mediation. So many people think that they need mediation when all they really needed was someone to answer a few questions and fill in a few blanks so they can better understand the process so they can discuss a solution. So we get a lot of calls where people are asking for mediation, and I think it's because while we don't advertise as doing mediation, I think we're the closest thing to it, aside from getting an attorney to do your mediation. In our town in Santa Clarita, if you do a Google search, which I just did, there's really no mediators that specialize in divorce that are not attorneys. It's really just attorneys out here, and we'll talk about that later. But the people that call me, and I'm glad to have that conversation, even when they schedule the consultation for asking about mediation, is to talk them through, find out what their true issues are. And what we find out is they really just, while they thought they needed mediation, they just needed a little bit of information to fill in the blanks. For instance, usually the questions are, how do we figure out spousal support? How do we figure out child support? How does it work in dividing up our property? What will the courts say? What is the court's involvement in the process? What if we don't want to divide our assets and debts equally? What if we don't, agree on just one issue? How do we resolve those? And so through our process, and again, and if we've never met, my name is Tim Blanchard, and we handle amicable divorce cases anywhere in California. So what I do in these consultations is talk them through what the decisions that have to be made. So in a divorce, you're going to be addressing alimony, spouse support, child support, division of assets and debts, who's keeping what, pension division, all that gets involved. All of that is involved in a divorce case. So what I'll usually do, either on a consultation, talking to make sure that we're a good fit for them, is talk through what issues need to be resolved, like we just discussed, and then filling in those blanks as far as how they can address those. So the spouse support, the child support, we can run calculations for folks, give them a start on where to start for what agreement they want to reach regarding spousal and child support. Talk to them about how what the community property laws look like, what they mean, how to utilize them, and then how to apply them to their specific needs. And the biggest thing is people think that the court's going to interfere. Now I'm talking about an amicable divorce. You're bypassing seeing a judge, and you get to reach an agreement on your own terms. And when you do that, the court's not going to interfere with your decision making. And that's what's nice about going through a process where we're helping you as a neutral third party, is you guys get to call the shots. You don't have to worry about the court's going to say, is the court going to confirm or approve your judgment because the division of assets and debt isn't equal, or because you came up with a child support or spouse support number that may not match the calculation. That's a good reason to go through this process, because you guys get to call the shots. But going back to the mediation, is when I talk to these folks, many of them didn't need mediation. In fact, we've had people come to us to handle their paperwork after meeting with a mediator, and they came to us with what you call a memorandum of understanding. And I said, "Oh, how much did you guys spend on mediation?" And they told me. And I said, "Well, what part of this didn't you agree on?" And they said, "No, we agreed on everything. They just typed this memorandum of understanding for us," which is a complete waste of time. So we're happy to work with you, not as a mediator, but to fill in that information, the blank information you need to fill in the gaps of information, is what I'm trying to say, so you can make those informed decisions. Okay, going to go on to our next slide. I want to talk about different types of divorce mediators. I was talking a few minutes ago how it seems in our neck of the woods, most of the mediators happen to be attorneys. We did have one prominent divorce mediation firm that they closed their doors maybe a year ago at this point. So your options really are just a divorce attorney for mediation, if that's what you need. So attorney mediators, I want to talk about the differences between attorney mediators and non-attorney mediators. So attorneys jumped into the mediation game several years ago when they realized that not everyone wants to litigate or go to court. So I'd probably say, 99% of divorce attorneys also do mediation. And just because they're an attorney doesn't mean they might be a great attorney. Does that mean they're going to be a great mediator? In my experience, what I found, just not doing mediation with attorneys, but just clients who have used attorneys for mediators, is they found that because the attorneys, have a litigator's mindset going to court, that they had trouble being a neutral third party, and they kind of were taking sides, if you will. And as I showed in that last slide, that's kind of the worst thing you can do is take sides. That's not what the mediator's role is there to do. So you're going to want to decide, do you need, and one of the benefits of having attorney mediators, they can give you that legal advice you may need if it's to that degree, as opposed to non-attorney mediators. Non-attorney mediators are not there to give you legal advice, and I can show you the slide. They're just there to help you come to a resolution, as we were talking about earlier. They're going to just help guide you, continue the conversation. And to be honest with you, we've had people go to mediators and say, that they were kind of frustrated because the attorney or the mediators, regardless if it was an attorney mediator or non-attorney mediator, would keep putting the conversation back on them for them to make the decision to help them keep talking it through. And that's how it has to be. I'll tell you, the second a mediator, and they said, Tim, we collectively said to the mediator, can you make this decision for me? And they would not. And I told them why. I said, this, even though you asked them to do that, the second they have an opinion, the party who that went against is going to feel like they're on the other person's side, and it's no longer a neutral third party. So, and people get frustrated with that. I get that. And they get frustrated because sometimes this adds to the time they need mediation to continue that conversation and keep talking things out until they can resolve it essentially on their own. The other thing I want to talk about is specialty mediators. if you're looking for a mediator, aside from deciding if you want an attorney mediator or a non-attorney mediator, is do you have a single issue that you might want to find a mediator who specializes in that specifically? For instance, there are mediators that focus strictly on helping people coming up with parenting plans, so custody issues. And I think if that is your, you don't want a jack of all trades mediator. If you agree on, say, assets and debts and alimony and all these other financial things, let's say, and it's just you cannot sit down and agree on a parenting plan, then I would recommend you find a mediator who specializes in child custody, and they are out there. And the good thing about the remote way things are being done these days, service wise, I think a lot of people have gone to doing this by Zoom mediation, if that works for you. So it'll give you more options. You don't have to find someone in your local area necessarily. So if you didn't have a mediator that specialized in custody in your area, you can find one that can probably do that by Zoom for you. Another specialty mediation service that has come around quite a bit now is what's called Certified Divorce Financial Analysts, CDFAs. And they specialize in the financial aspect of your divorce. So how to best divide up assets and debts, how to do that maybe with the best tax implications, dealing with your home, dealing with pensions. So purely financial related. And we've referred out to those folks quite a bit. So people that have come to us, started their divorce, and they're amicable. They just need a little bit of tax advice and someone to go over the finances to let them know what those decisions they're making, how that impacts them financially and maybe tax wise, and maybe provide them with some other options or solutions in doing that. There's also, we've had people with companies, so husband and wives that own corporations, that they're running them, and they want to know the best way to address that in the divorce moving forward. So we've also referred out to mediators who have a business specialty focus as far as their mediation. So there's lots of different options, and there are specialties. So I want to call that out if you are looking for a mediator. Maybe you do need a jack of all trades, mediator. In which case, I would just look at reviews and make sure they're, how the reviews are. Maybe get a personal recommendation from someone that's used them. Other than that, look for someone that specializes if that's what your needs are. One thing I wanted to talk about, I'm kind of hiding it with my photo here, excuse me, is when it comes to non-attorney mediators, there is no specific licensing requirement like there is for attorneys. So, they obviously have their attorney license, but for mediators, non-attorney mediators, you could just decide one day you want to be a mediator and start a business as a mediator. There are certifications and courses and whatnot, and there's even some that are more prominent than others that people that mediators will put on their website to say, hey, we went to XYZ training course, and it's more prominent, or people are using that, and that's the go-to training course. But for $40, you can also get how to be a mediator course online. So you just want to make sure, check their certifications and see what their certifications are as part of your investigation into looking for a mediator. Okay. Next thing I want to talk to you about is the cost of mediation. So I did some research on this, and I'll kind of go over how we came up with our numbers. But as an average cost, I know people do not want to get locked into, an average cost, but I looked at several different variations of mediation, and I would say that the average cost of just your regular old mediation, middle of the road, not super complicated, not super easy, is going to be somewhere between $3,000 and $8,000. And that's going to take into account your filing fees, the time to have someone process your paperwork with the court, the actual judgment forms to get those filed, and then the time actually sitting with the mediator, going, getting your mediation actually done. And obviously the hourly rates and that average cost, I'm giving you that range of $3,000 to $8,000. Is it really going to come down to how much time you spend in front of the mediator? So the next thing I wanted to talk about, well, let me back up to the hourly rates. Hourly rates with attorneys is going to be their standard hourly rate. So I would say in LA County and in California in general, you're probably going to find hourly rates for attorneys between $400 and $600 an hour. There's definitely people that are less expensive than that, and there's also people that are more expensive than that as far as an hourly rate. So that's going to have an impact on your total mediation costs. I know there are some mediators that, and especially the one that comes to mind is a certified divorce financial analyst we were talking about a minute ago, charges $200 to $250 an hour. Keep in mind the hourly rate is not going to be the only thing, the only factor as far as cost. You also want to think how good are they at their job in bringing you to a resolution. So that would kind of go back to getting a personal recommendation or checking reviews and see how they're doing. But I want to talk to you about how to save money when going through mediation. So if you go into mediation, let me set an example for you. You guys just say, hey, we're going to mediate. We agree to mediate. We haven't made any decisions yet, but we want to do mediation. I think the worst thing you could do is just show up in the mediator's office and not have discussed any of your issues whatsoever, to the point where the mediator has to grind through everything to ask questions that you already may have an agreement to, wasting valuable money in hours spent going over things you guys have already discussed. So number one, I would say discuss issues in advance and write them down, whatever it might be, even if it's one thing. If you guys agree to each keep a car, and write down which car you're keeping, and if that's the only thing you guys agreed upon, then at least that's something. But that's not one less thing that you guys would need to talk about in going through mediation. But detail out, and I'm sure it's going to be a little bit more than that you guys can figure out without a mediator. But just detail out everything that you guys discussed that you agree to, put it on paper, and then detail out specifically what it is that you guys don't agree to. Because with the mediators I've talked to, they don't necessarily like trying to grind through either and trying to dig out what you guys agree and don't agree to. They like when people go in and say, we talked, we agreed to XYZ issues, and here's the specifics that we don't agree to, that we need help coming to a better understanding on. And that way they can just spend that time drilling down on those issues, and the amount of hours that you use for mediation are going to be significantly reduced. So that goes into number two here, the narrow down your needs. Go in with a specific plan. Go in having discussed this. Hopefully you can. I mean, if you can't have that discussion in advance, mediation might not be right for you at all. Because they're not going to, unless you're going to a high conflict mediator where you're in separate rooms. That's not really the point of this discussion. We're not really talking about high conflict mediation, although that is something you can do as well. But we're talking about where the parties are amicable. They want to reach an agreement. They just need some help with the discussion and moving the conversation forward. So discuss issues in advance, narrow down your needs, be prepared. So what I mean by that is, if you guys are going to talk about financials, have already your documents printed, statements, mortgages, credit cards, have everything out. Maybe if you like doing Excel spreadsheets, have a spreadsheet that has it broken down. The courts, even, you can use the schedule of assets and debts to list out your assets and debts. Even though you might not be going through the divorce process yet, you can still use that form it'll help you kind of delineate, the house, the cars, credit cards, and pensions as far as what's owed and how much money you guys have. And so you guys can start the discussion, but definitely being prepared, narrow down your needs, discuss issues in advance. That will help reduce the cost of your overall mediation. The next thing I want to talk about is when to start mediation. So a couple options, obviously, before filing for divorce, after filing for divorce, and I want to talk about the benefits of each. So when people call me, and again, because we handle only amicable divorce cases throughout California, I think I've said that a few times, repeat myself, is when people call me, and we're having this consultation, I'm trying to get a sense of how amicable they are and where they are in the process of discussion of divorce. And I'm usually asking, have you guys talked about divorce? How recent has that conversation been? Have you discussed actual terms? So I'll try and really drill down to see where they're at as far as their level of cooperation, where they're at as far as their agreement. And usually they're going to fall anywhere in between. We've talked about everything and we agree upon everything. To we agree that we will be amicable. We just need some help filling in the blanks, running some numbers for alimony and child support, and a discussion on how, with their options for dividing up custody, assets and debts and so forth. So those will be the conversations that we'll have. But if I find that they are not in agreement, they are cooperative, but they are having difficulty talking or even broaching the subject, sometimes I'll recommend, and here's why, and then I'll tell you what I was going to say, is if you file for divorce at a point where you guys are really not in a good spot, even though you agree to do it amicably, the filing of the divorce papers could actually be the issue that causes you guys to not be amicable, because now there's a petition for divorce and someone's being served, and all that goes into filing for divorce. It becomes real. Now you've discussed it, but now there's divorce papers on the table and now it becomes real. Maybe that will interfere with your ability to do the mediation. So when I have that feeling that that might be the case with them, I'll actually tell them, why don't you talk to your spouse? But one of the options is to start your mediation before you actually file for divorce. There's no problem in spending a month or two, or however long that takes, a week, to do your mediation, get everything resolved, then come back to us when you're in a good spot, and it'll make that process that much faster. The only downside to that is people are often interested in getting the 6-month cooling off period clock ticking, and that doesn't happen during mediation. So you can say, hey, and we've done this too. We just say, well, we're just going to file a divorce, get the clock ticking, then take as much time as you need to do your mediation at that point, because at least you're doing it within that 6-month time frame, so you're not losing time. We've had people who've gone to mediators and spent months in mediation, 4, 5, 6 months. And when they called us to complete their paperwork and put them through the actual divorce process with the court, well, we're a little frustrated that after 4, 5, 6 months of mediation, that they're nothing had started with the court, and they're basically at square one with starting the clock on the 6 months. So they have to go. That whole waiting period begins new. So that would be one downside to that. So we kind of talked about the after filing for divorce. When let's say that I'll give you for instance, we have clients, and again, through our consultation, they do a really good job at assessing if they're a good fit for us, or we're a good fit for them based on how amicable they are, their ability to reach an agreement, and so forth. Very infrequently, something will happen during our process. They thought they had it all figured out, but then they hit a glitch on, I don't know, let's just say child support, spouse support, doesn't really matter. And they just can't figure it out, even with my help, walking them through their options. And I will do some light mediation. I don't even consider it mediation. We don't charge for it. It's just, in my opinion, I'm just filling in some blanks so they can make that decision on their own. But let's say they can't get past that. It doesn't mean you have to go right to an attorney. It doesn't mean you guys are fighting or need to litigate. That's where we've been referred people out to a mediator. So for just that one specific issue. So let's say it's a financial issue. We've done this before. We say, hey, call this mediator. We're not affiliated with them, but they are a certified divorce financial analyst, and let them, spend an hour with them on a Zoom meeting and see if they can help you talk through these different implications and see if that resolves your issue. And then just come back to me and say, yeah, okay, we got it resolved. That's a good way to do it after filing for divorce. So definitely benefits of doing doing mediation before. There's definitely benefits of doing mediation after. So it really depends on what your needs are as far as when you actually do your mediation. Now, again, and I said this in the beginning, do you even need mediation? If you just need a little bit of help, if you just have a couple of questions, if I fill in a couple of blanks as far as your options on what to do with support, if the court gets involved in the process, if you have to see a judge, if they have to confirm it, approve it, make sure it's valid, I am happy to do that. We do that on our calls, just for our initial consultations. We do that during the process. If something comes up, we can fill in those blanks. And we just had a client recently, and they're amicable as could be, but they really need help on the financial part, coming to having us run some numbers for you. And for instance, we ran spousal and child support numbers, and the amount that we calculated was more than they wanted to pay. And the question was, well, do we have to go off what the guideline support amount is from the state of California? And I said, no, you guys can come to a higher amount, a lower amount, none at all. It's completely up to you guys. So call me if you are thinking you need mediation. talk to me about what it is you think you need mediation for. Let's go over what those issues are. Let's see if I can resolve this. And then we can skip the mediation process altogether, get right into the divorce process, and save you guys some money. All right. Good talking to you. And we will see you. I think my next live broadcast is on Wednesday at noon. Take care.